Hey everybody, welcome to my last video coverage of the Hurricane Irma stuff. Like I said prior, I didn't want to put too many of these type of videos on my fishing channel, but this I think will be a good wrap up. Basically, I'm over here in Bayview Park. If you watched one of my videos, the movie actually, I showed this park and the devastation from all the trees getting knocked over and limbs everywhere, and it wasn't even possible to walk through. But if you look through now, it's all been cleared out. They've cut up the fallen trees, trucked away all the branches and stuff, and just got it. Yeah, it's rough and dying and needs some fine tuning, but in general, it's kind of getting back to normal again. And that's kind of representative of the way Key West is. We've had 2 weeks exactly now since the hurricane. Businesses are open, people are back. The best thing about it, in regards, if there was a best thing, is that it happened in September, which is our lowest tourist season. So to be honest with you, some of these businesses would have been closed during September anyway, so you just got to take it like with a grain of salt there. But what this video is going to be about is kind of just, like I said, a wrap up where we're at, but also to kind of go through the stages of like why I stayed in Key West versus taking off. There were some specific incidents on why I ended up staying, as well as my basic plan of attack if I stayed, what I was going to do, and how I lay things out. So I really ended up not losing anything, not having any difficulties, and really not having much of a hard time while getting through these couple of weeks. So anyways, I'm going to head back home, go to my white chalkboard, and kind of go through some stuff with you. When we're talking about hurricanes, there's actually a little bit of a background. We actually have a hurricane season, and that season runs from May through November. That tends to be the main period when these hurricanes are born and are the most active. On average, there tends to be roughly around between 5 and 10 Category 1 to Category 5 hurricanes during that time frame. And this kind of offsets those people that say, well, if there's a hurricane, I'm out of there. That's the first thing you should do. Never stick around. The risk with that is that if most people don't have the ability 10 times a year to just drop everything and just take off. And secondarily, it's just not, there's no specific path. Like we don't get 5 to 10 hurricanes hitting the Keys every year, or Texas or South Florida. They just are grown in that Atlantic side basin around Africa. They establish themselves and just kind of move in this direction. So where they hit is just not predictable. So it's just not possible to say, oh, if there's a hurricane, you should leave the Keys. But where are you going to go? Because they'll hit from the Florida Keys all the way up the East Coast of the United States, and then all the way to the west from all the U.S. all the way to Mexico. So it's just not a matter of, well, if there's a hurricane 10 times a year, I'm going to California. If you can do that, that's great, but for most people, it's just not a possibility. Okay, so let's kind of go into specifics on why I didn't leave. Now, looking back like a week before the Hurricane Irma came and actually hit, to be honest with you, the smartest people, if they had the ability, left a week prior to it and just basically boarded up their stuff, got their place ready, and then just flew to wherever and just bypassed the whole mess. Yeah, definitely the smartest, but again, do you have that capability of every time that there's a hurricane, do you just abandon ship? If you have the ability, it's great. For most, no. And then for a lot of people, it's just not worth the hassle. If it's not going to hit me, I'm not going to move and just upheave my whole life for a possibility. But those people that got out, dang, that was a brilliant move. Okay. Then once we start getting in within the week, and then we could start getting those narrowed forecasts where they can get a more of a general idea of where this hurricane is going. So like 4 or 5 days out, the initial forecast, when the red flag started coming, and then the panic started to like, uh-oh, this is going to be bad, started when they started forecasting that the hurricane was going to come up the Bahamas, and then it was going to impact Miami, and then bounce along the east coast of Florida, and then to wherever once it got up there. And so what happened there? Okay, For me, being down here, we're basically 110 miles from the mainland, probably another 130, 150 miles from that Miami, Palm Beach area there, where that thing was going to impact. We weren't going to get anything. We weren't even in the hurricane cone. We were just tropical storms, which is, I'll go fishing. So I'm not worried about it. I'm not going anywhere. So that's 4 or 5 days out. Then what happened is, when they put that forecast out, what do you think happened? This southeast Florida is probably the most populated area in Florida. All of these people along this east coast, where do you think they went? Okay, boom. They go to the west coast. Because if that thing bounced along the east coast, this side over here would get the winds and stuff, but it wasn't going to be bad. Are people going to make that whatever hundreds of miles drives and try to get out to the main part of the U.S. or just zip across a 100-mile pass there, Alligator Alley or whatever freeway, just get across to the west coast and be fine? Most people have friends, relatives, just one night. Yeah, this will be fine, no big deal. But you have that whole population starting to say, oh, time to move, or we're going to move, and then they left and moved across there. Then 3 or 4 day forecast. Oh no, it's going to hit that Bahamas. It's going to stay at that angle a little bit later. Okay, now it's going to hit here, right there where the Keys kind of, we call it, well, it's kind of Key Largo or Florida City. Key Largo is like the first island of the Keys, and Florida City is where that Highway US 1 runs into the actual mainland US is Florida City. It's going to bop there. Then it's going to go through the mainland of, it's not going to bounce on the outside. It's going to go right up this east coast side of it. Okay. And now they're start throwing in that word catastrophic. Okay. Every description is catastrophic, total devastation, catastrophic. Okay. Boom. Now that's going to hit there. Then it's going to take out those inland parts and half of this. And then it's going to run right up the middle, maybe bounce out and then come back in again. All right, still that east coast. Me, I'm still not affected, not worried about it. We're not even in the hurricane part of it, still a tropical storm, 150 miles away. But now that got people worried that we're down here, that we're hunkered in and just saying, well, it's a good possibility it's going to go to the east and stay out into the ocean and not worry about it. Now that they're saying, no, this thing is coming inland and they're pretty sure about it, and it's going to stay in on the inland side, it's going to wipe out catastrophically any houses, anything in those areas there. So those initial people that left, okay, they were fine. They're over in Tampa filling up the hotels with friends. They're stacked up over there. That change made a big difference because it wasn't a lot less chance that it was going to go out in the ocean. It was coming inland and it was going to hit them hard. And that land-based hurricanes are going to be pretty brutal. So that kicked out another 40, 50, 60% of that population on the East Coast. Now moved over to the far West Coast. Okay, and now they're like, oh, this is going to be close on both sides, but over here we're still 100 miles away. We'll be safe. It's going to suck there. And you got to remember, the most heavily populated area is this side. Now all those people are shifted over. My game plan was, if it's going to hit the East Coast and I'm going to evacuate, my plan is no different than really them. I'm going to just go up the Keys, Alligator Alley, head over to Fort Myers, so I'm still close to the Keys. It's just a day or two, no big deal. Find a place, I find a place. If not, I camp in my car. And then when it's done, I'm just a couple hours away, I'm back in the Keys, and then a couple hours, I'm back home again, no big deal. With that big shift though, that takes that entire population over to the West Coast. Now that kind of limits me and like, wow, now I've got to deal with a couple million people all of a sudden just shifted right over to where I was going to go. That's going to be difficult. Then, okay, they said, oh, but this is about day 3 there. Okay, now it's going to come in, hit a little bit farther down the Keys. It's going to go through the West Coast side now and go right up the center of Florida, catastrophically destroying entire Florida. Okay, so all these people that were on the East Coast are like, holy crap, we just drove over to the middle of the path to where this thing's going to be. So their better option was, okay, go back home to the East Coast where that's going to be at least a little safer than the West Coast, or we got to drive and get the hell out of here because all of Florida, all of South Florida is going to get destroyed. So now all the people shifted, going either back to the east, or like a lot of people did, is started heading north on both sides and just saying, we got to get out of Florida because catastrophically, entire Florida is going to get destroyed because that hurricane is going to go right up the middle. Okay, there is no safe sides from this. Now, that leaves me still, it's going to come through this 3/4 of the way up the Keys. Now I'm in Hurricane 1. Still nothing for the Keys. We're pretty set. Everybody's pretty much been through 1, 2, 3s, and it's not been a big deal. This is a 5, but if you're not in the eye of it, you're 3, 2, Key West, a 1. No big deal, big deal. I'm not even gonna worry about it. Might have to do some shore fishing, no kayak fishing. Still no big deal, okay? Then you get down to day 2, day 1, day 2, then they say, oh wait, no, we weren't right. Now it's coming along through the Bahamas, it's gonna hit that Cuba line, and then it's gonna come up, okay? And then it's gonna go Marathon, which is basically 40, 45 miles from Key West. It basically almost splits the Keys right in half. And then what's gonna do, it's gonna skirt through the Keys and then go through, hit Fort Myers, that area, right along the West Coast, and do what they said it was gonna do on the East Coast, but now it's on the West Coast. It's gonna bounce along the West Coast and then hit inland, okay? Now for those people that were like, from the East Coast, they shipped to the West Coast and they're eyeballing like, well, it's going up to the center, we might as well stay over here. We're set in our hotels, we got our stuff all set up, we'll wait it out. Now that thing's coming on the West Coast, Hurricane 4 class winds, now these people are like, you need to get out because this is going to be horribly damaged, beyond catastrophic on this West Coast. So now the people are like, holy crap, we're stuck. Now the only way to go is either back up or risk it going back to the East Coast. And even the East Coast isn't going to be safe because of the way the hurricanes run. This is going to get storm surge more risk than the wind on this side. What does that do to me? Oh crap, I am stuck, okay? And the reason why I'm stuck is all those newscasts were sending people from the East Coast to the West Coast. And then it was from the West Coast back to the East Coast. Or East Coast, West Coast, head out of Florida, all right? People are driving like crazy. People are starting to panic at this point because they don't know where to go. One of the big issues and the biggest factor why I was like, the three biggest, the different reasons why I said, screw this, I end up staying was, one, there was no gas, okay? All these people going back and forth, people just, we're gonna get wiped out, you gotta have gas, so they're stocking up the gas, they're wiping out the gas. They were saying like, oh, 60% of Florida's gas stations were empty. Yeah, there's 40% that might have fuel, but that's up here in the Panhandle. They're in some little hick towns all spotted away, but you're not finding any gas on all these major thoroughfares out of these areas because it's bumper to bumper cars with people with no gas because they've been running back and forth, up and down, not knowing where to go because they're panicked because all of these reports of, if you go this way, you'll be safe. No, you're not gonna be safe now, you gotta go back. Oh, no, you gotta get out of Florida, okay? And remember, I'm down here 110, 120 miles from behind them, okay? So for me, I have to make up that 3-4 hour drive just to get to the mainland to be the bottom of the US. Then I've got who knows how many millions of people on the road panicking, not knowing where to go, and having no gas, there's no food, there's no place to stay, there's no shelters. Shelters weren't even opening because there's so many people that there's people lining up outside and they weren't even open, they didn't have places to put them. And I'm gonna be coming from Key West, burn up most of my gas, not being able to find gas, not knowing where to go, not knowing where to shelter, okay? And what would end up is I would go as far as I could, get stuck somewhere, and end up riding out the hurricane as it comes straight for me on some underpass of some freeway somewhere. Then it came down to the last days where it said, okay, now it's coming right here, 25 to 30 miles from Key West. Then it was just, what am I gonna do now, okay? There's just that same risk. It's just total chaos now up in these areas. It's just gridlock. People are trying to run, they're trying to go, they're not sure what to do, total confusion. And so my thing was, well, I'm staying. Okay, so that's the main reason why I worried about going there. Not all that chaos, but then on the flip side, even if you survive it, trying to get back was been done. Okay, I wouldn't have come back if there was actually some damage up here. It wouldn't have been worth while for me to wait 2 weeks to get back in to find everything's destroyed. Then I have nothing. So I would have just, if it would have came across the Keys and damaged it like they said, I would have just waited out and then just flew back to California, flew back wherever I want to go traveling, do something else. But there would be no more Key West. I wouldn't even come back because I don't have anything here that's that important to me that I can't miss it. So that's kind of what happened and why I did not evacuate. It just worked out. It just started okay and got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And then it affected this whole area. All those people had no idea what to do, and I was behind them in line. And it's like, dude, I'm gonna get that hurricane right up my rear, and it just wasn't worth it. So I stuck it out. Now, once I had established that I wasn't going anywhere, that I was gonna be riding it out. Now we'll add that there was no plane flights out. They had 2, 3, 4 days ago before the hurricane, it was done. You couldn't get a flight out. Not only was it everything was booked, but then they were like $200-300 flights were now $1,500 because the airlines were gouging everybody, but it just wasn't possible. So people were driving up to Atlanta in order to get a flight that they could leave. But I mean, yeah, it's just crazy. But once I decided, hey, I'm staying, I had a couple options that I came up with. One was I was just gonna stay here, and I kind of went over that in my movie videos. I have a pretty good location. I'm in a no flood zone area, so there's minimal surge flood risk. With the class 5, there could have been, but anything less than that, it wasn't really a problem. It's a fairly sturdy construction. It's not one of those prefabs, and it's not just a cheap wood, old school, classic Keys house. Plus, I'm kind of encased around a bunch of 2-story houses, so it's really sheltered where I'm at. And at third, my other part was not really worried about the winds because of that, surrounded by stuff, but was primarily that surge flooding. And if it did come, I had my kayak inside the house, so I had 6 foot of flood above the 6 foot that I'm at, so they would have to have 10 to 15 foot surges to affect me, and I would just get on my kayak and float around my living room. So that was my first option. 2, when I found that parking garage, which is a full concrete, heavy duty parking garage structure, I knew that was a good option. And I felt not so clear when they said class 5 hitting us within 20 miles and being right by the eye, and 10 to 15 foot surge and everything like that. That was my next go-to, that I was going to go to that parking garage, get to the 3rd or 4th floor, wait till everything was settled, and then I would move my car from the park where I had parked. I would move it to a sheltered spot wherever, even if it was not a parking spot, and just be in the perfect spot to get it out of the wind. As the wind changed, I would just move the car to a different spot and just ride it out there. And realistically, when I was getting my car, there was quite a few people that ended up doing that, because you had a lot of people that were in that middle Keys that evacuated down to Key West, and that would have worked out as well. But then third, my landlord Fred got me set up at the synagogue, which was good all the way around. I talked about it. It was built for class 4, class 5, so it was in a extremely no flood zone. Then they built it up with rocks and dirt specifically to get it raised correctly. Then they put a concrete pad on top of that, and before they poured that concrete, they put concrete pillars all the way down to the base ground, and with steel reinforcements in it, and then built those pillars up, then poured the floor, then put concrete walls, put a concrete ceiling, and it just wasn't going anywhere. And then tons of food, because they use that as like a banquet room for a lot of festivals and events and stuff. So Nadia had all the tons and tons of food and everything in there, and So I had a few people, wasn't a lot of us, I think it was 8 or 9 of us, and then they brought their pets, and it was just a really good deal, so I ended up doing that, but that was also a third option. Once I knew I was going to stay, I knew I had to prepare for it, and a lot of that prep part was all based on, I was planning on, if it hit us that hard, I'm planning for a month without any utilities, any type of help, having to be self-sufficient. So that's what I basically prepped for: food, water, safety equipment, lighting equipment, that kind of stuff, being able to survive. And there's going to be structures, so I wasn't too concerned with that, but all the other necessities that you need in order to make it a month. And the other thing was to make sure I spread things around. I had my stuff here at home all ready to go and secured that way, but then I also did a sampling of the same necessities and packed that into my car, which I had in the parking garage. And then I also did another sampling, and I got a couple backpacks, and I took that to the synagogue. So if I lost 1 or 2 of those sections, I still had enough in those individuals to last a couple of weeks, so I would be okay. And then finally, just having some evac plans. I kept enough gas, separate gas, plus I had my car full of gas, my motorcycle full of gas, a bunch of empty canisters. I have my kayak, which surprisingly would have been a very effective evacuation plan if I couldn't rely on anybody else, okay? Now, I wasn't too worried about it. We are a heavy military base in Key West. A lot of people don't understand that. We not only have the Coast Guard, but we've got the Navy, we've got a big Air Force base, we have a lot of military structures and based around here, so they were going to take care of Key West, that side of it. So I knew it wasn't, the risk of being alone for a month wasn't going to happen, but there was that risk that if that hurricane took out the entire southern half of Florida, okay, it was going to take them and be very difficult for them to make it down to us. So there had to be some self-reliance there. But that was kind of the evac plan, was I could put together my kayak to the Adventure Island, which is both outriggers, with the sail, with the motor, with my pedal, with my paddle, with all my supplies and stuff. It's 600-pound capacity, and I could put my way up and get to a point where I could evac out of there. So in case any of these 42 bridges failed, I could still get past that and get to safety if I need be. So that was kind of the gist of my planning there. All right, so here's probably the most important takeaway I can make out of these type of videos is understanding the survival part. I think a lot of people are kind of interested in this as well, but everyone I think assume that knows that like food, water, shelter are like the 3 key components that you're like in a survival situation that you need to focus on. I actually include safety in mine as being a 4th mandatory component. What I don't think people understand is why they are important. Yeah, people will say, oh, food, yeah, you need food for energy so you can go out and do stuff. Oh, you need water so you stay dehydrated, or you stay hydrated so you can go out and do something. You need shelter so you're out of the elements, okay? Now, yeah, those are valid, but that's not the reason why these are so important. The key reason why you need all of these, and again, there is no numerical value that makes one more important than the other. You either have all 4 of these or you're going to have problems. Now, the reason why that these are so important is what they provide is your ability to think. And that ability to think overrules everything. If you make bad decisions in these kind of survival type situations, things will not end up good for you. Regardless of all the other good things, if you do not make good decisions, all the good beneficial things that you have going for you won't help you. So for example, water. Take for example, people, their boat sinks and they get on a life raft and they have no water. And the sun's out, they get dehydrated, they get loopy, they can't think. What do? They start drinking the salt water. And what happens? That basically ends up killing them. Food. That guy into the wild, whatever, went up into the Alaska, same deal, ran out of food, hungry, starving, eats some bad berries, gets sick, dies, okay? Because you're not thinking straight. Shelter, okay? Shelter, I guess, is not the shelter that I think a lot of people think about. Oh, if the sun's out, you need the shade, or if it's raining, you need a place to get out of the rain, or if it's snowing, you need some place to kind of get you out of the wind. No, what shelter really is your ability to sleep, okay? Having a place where you can shut your eyes and shut your brain off and sleep and get rest so you can make good decisions, okay? It's already been shown that being sleep deprived and driving is worse than drinking and driving. And I think a lot of people kind of can understand that part of that is when you don't have enough sleep, how good are the decisions that you make? And even one that on the safety part of it, and that's what I'm including, involves being sick. And I think that's probably what everybody will understand. You get the flu, you have a high fever, you're not thinking straight, you're kind of delusional, okay? Now think if you were in that state in a life-threatening situation, not in just one instance, but day in and day out, you have to make life-threatening decisions, and you're in that hazy kind of feverish mindset, okay? How long are you gonna survive? Not too long. And again, that's every single one of these. If you don't have the food to keep your body strong so that you can make good decisions, you don't have water so you stay dehydrated so your brain keeps working and you make good decisions, you don't have sleep, okay, so that you can make good decisions. You have safety, so you stay healthy, so your body is healthy, your mind's healthy, so you can make good decisions. So those key characteristics are why it's not just those individual things and where people follow the TV shows. It's about being able to think and make good decisions. Because like I said, you can have all those perfectly, everything laid out for you, but if you're doing stupid things, none of that stuff is going to save you. So my prep wise, like earlier I said, I prepped for 30 days. So I had food that would last me 30 days. Mine is Denison's chili in a can and canned tuna. Those were the basis of my food groups. Okay, I could get a case of each and I'm good for 30 days. You can eat them right out of the can. They're self-contained, so they'll last forever. You can just pop the can and just eat them. You don't need to cook them. You could heat them up just in the can. You could use them in a bunch of different ways and they still taste good. And they get you those core basic just energy foods just to get you going. No, it's not the best food groups. It doesn't cover the food pyramid, but just good, easily contained foods. Again, I'm not trekking type survival. I'm in one just place. I just need to wait it out type of thing. So those work fine. And then I had a bunch of all the candies and junk food and bread and tortillas and cheese and stuff. So I wasn't hurting in that regard, but those were my core food backups that I had. Water, I had probably close to 50 gallons of water just stored up in different containers. I had a couple of the 3 or 4 5-gallon drinking containers, the ones you put in the machines. And then I've got individual plastic totes of water, and I've got all my individual fishing bottle 2 liters and my 1 liter waters and my trekking bottles of water. So I had about 50 gallons built up there. Shelter-wise, places to sleep. Even if this place fell down, I had my car. I have my camping stuff, full tent. I have a hammock. Which is most important to me, is a mosquito net. Again, that shelter part is being able to sleep. I can't sleep when there's mosquitoes buzzing and biting me and bugs and stuff. So that mosquito net was more important than the tent and the sleeping bags and the hammock and my air mattress. I just need that mosquito net to keep me sheltered outside somewhere. Bugs can't bite me and keep me awake, and I'll just snooze all night and my mind is fine. And safety stuff, clean water, clean food, just basic medicines. I don't have really any illnesses, but if I did, I'd make sure I was stocked up. Basic Band-Aids and all that kind of stuff, and just knowing how to use them. So that was my preparedness for it. But that's kind of the takeaways to understand, is that these things are not just to have, but it's that core part is just so that you can think and make good decisions. So that's the takeaway. Hopefully you pick up from that. Now we can kind of go over, I created a should have done type list of things that I didn't have during this instance, and I would just add it to the board as I came up with them. Remember though, I had all my other stuff as well. Like I had a couple grand worth of cash just to, in case stuff goes, there's no utilities, you gotta pay, you can't use credit cards, so you gotta have cash. I have 3 different cell phones. I got my VHF radio, my laptop, so I can communicate as best as I could with however I could. Full clothing, just all the other stuff that I'm not necessarily going to bring up, but just the common sense stuff I had. But this is things that I did not have, and that kind of threw me off, and I should have, but for next time I'll definitely have. One was a radio. We had 0 communications. The cell towers got taken down in Marathon, so you couldn't get cell service here. The 3 ways of communication were if you had a sat phone. And how many people have a sat phone? Not many, okay? Around here there were, because we had the military and we had a lot of boaters have them. So they were around. I did see a few, but in the normal people, not going to have them. 2 was the radio. There was only one radio station, and that was 104.1 FM, and they have a couple different stations, but the only radio station and they were the only way to get communications about all the relief efforts, what was going on, what damages has occurred, where to get supplies, where to get water, when water was coming, when help was coming. The only, there's no internet, no cell phones, no newspaper, there's just nothing. That radio station literally saved the day for everybody around, okay, and that was it. And then the 3rd way was landlines. After a while, the landlines came up, and if you had a landline, you could kind of get a call through occasionally. It was very spotty, and it didn't work really well, but people could communicate that well. If you had the packaged cable, TV, phone, internet, all that stuff, package deals, you could just unplug your internet service and plug in a landline phone, and you can get dial out. So a lot of people didn't realize that. Then they started spreading around, and a lot of people were running telephone lines outside their businesses or homes, because fax lines and stuff, all those still work. And then they allowed people just to come up and then use their phone to kind of communicate with people. Like I never got a chance to do that, and I was able to call my parents on day 3 or day 4 to let them know I was okay, because that's when finally a spotty cell service came in. But one of the things I needed was a radio. The only radio I had was my car. So the only way I could do it was go out to my car, turn the ignition on, turn the radio on, and listen to it. And they were on the air through the hurricane, then after the hurricane, just dispensing news. No music, no blah, blah, blah. It was just all about hurricane response, help, that kind of stuff. And everybody, that was about the only forms of communication and entertainment. So that would have been useful. I needed to have a portable radio. I used to have one, my uncle's old one, but I couldn't find it. I'm not sure what happened. It must have not made this last move, but I definitely need to pick up a radio. 2 is a solar panel recharger, okay? Again, there's no utilities, and how do you charge up all this stuff? Cell phones. I'm trying to do the GoPros, my camera, VHF radio, anything, all those things. How do you charge those? So having a solar panel recharger would have been very beneficial to be able to do that. Sure, a generator would be nice too. That would have solved a lot. But again, not everybody had that capability. I also used, I didn't put it here, but an adapter for my car so I could plug it into my car and charge the other things would have been good. So that was the actual. Another one was having hard candies would have been nice. I had some like chocolates and stuff, but that wasn't so good. But having some just mints or fruit candies, hard candies would have been nice. Again, these are just stuff that came up that would have been really nice to have, just some sugary stuff to kind of make your way through the day, make things a little bit easier psychologically as well. Butane gas mix for my little cook stove, the one you see that I use when I do these shore lunches and stuff. Nobody has those around here in Key West, so I need to figure out a way to get them shipped in or something like that. But they had the bigger ones for like the lanterns and stuff, but they don't fit my stove. I didn't end up needing it because I just ate out all the time, but I definitely need to have some backups just in general. Fresh fruit is another one like the hard candy. It wasn't necessary, but I could feel my body starting to sing. And one of my first clips on that video, the movie video, was being so happy I found orange juice and Gatorade. It's just your body starts telling you that, hey, you need something. And my body was telling me I needed vitamin C or something like that. And having like a bottle of like all day or all-in-one vitamins or something, I think would be very helpful, especially on that safety or that physical health type thing. Was if you're in long periods of not having a balanced diet, that'll help alleviate stuff. So a multivitamin would probably been good to have. And a battery fan. My neighbor had a battery fan, and that goes back to that shelter, which actually refers to being able to sleep. When there's no, luckily it was cooler and it had some breezes, so it wasn't too bad. And once your body acclimates to the heat and the humidity, you kind of doesn't mess you up as much. But having a battery operated fan was an excellent idea. When he told me he had one, I was like, boy, might have to get out my looting t-shirt and loot his electric fan, or a battery fan, not electric fan. But anyways, those are just the things that I missed that I think would have been good additions if I had or for the next hurricane that I will have. So not anything life-changing, but would make things better. Okay, so that's kind of wraps it up. That was my back end story to the Hurricane Irma, all my prep and what actually happened during the hurricane and after the hurricane. And fortunate for me, I didn't have any damage, didn't have any issues. Stuff came back, utility-wise came back relatively quickly, although I am on my second day of not having internet again for some reason. I don't know what the problem is, but overall, it didn't really affect me negatively in any really big regards. It was just a little bit of discomfort, but not too bad. Very low stress, everything worked out well. Didn't really need all this prep stuff that I went through, but if it did go wrong and it did go sideways, I think I would have been fine, just as fine, if it didn't work out as nicely. But anyways, hope you found that interesting. Like I said, I probably won't do any more of these Hurricane Irma things, but I'll put up some little tidbits here as part of my fishing stuff, just so people, that it is part of the keys. And just to let people know as well is that I'm fishing again, I'm catching again, and stuff is getting cleaned up, things are opening up. So if you're around and thinking about coming down, I would say definitely do it. Hotels are opening up again, restaurants are opening up again, the tourist stuff is getting there, the waters are cleaning up, the fish are there. Talking to some of the captains, they're chomping on the bit to take people out and get things, get the rust knocked off. And so definitely if you're interested in coming down, don't hesitate to do it. Yeah, it's not the pretty green Key West as before, and it's not packed full of tourists as before, but that might be a good thing. You can kind of see the recovery efforts that's going on, and it'll be much more intimate in regards to more locals than tourists, and it won't be so tourist oriented. It'll be just more regular life stuff. You'll probably enjoy it even more so. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I will see you next video. Bye.